Welcome to Mediumship Moments with second-generation psychic medium Kym Durham. Join her as she shares her personal journey with mediumship, connects with your loved ones, and discusses topics dealing with spirituality.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mediumship Moments. I'm your host, Kym Durham, second-gen psychic medium. And today I have a very special guest with me. Today I have my daughter, Aubrey, with me. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. Today I thought, since our backgrounds are so unusual, in that I grew up with a mother who was a well-known psychic medium who started the business PSI Psychic Studies and Investigations. That was her paranormal investigation group. She studied parapsychology, but all realms of it. Aubrey has a mom who is second-gen psychic medium. And for a brief point of your life, we all lived under the same roof.
We sure did.
Yeah. So I thought today would be a little bit about talking about what it was like to have a grandmother who was so well known as a psychic medium, and then, compare, contrast, if you will, with a mom being a psychic medium as well. And just talk about, your upbringing and what that was like, and share some, if you want, some funny stories about it. So we'll get everybody introduced to you. You're Aubrey. You're my daughter.
Guilty.
Guilty is, yes. And how would you describe yourself?
Well, I get a lot of my charisma from you. I'm a little bit of a social butterfly, not afraid to.
It's all good.
Not afraid to talk. I love the paranormal world. As somebody who has quite literally.
Is that nature or nurture? Did you inherit that?
The jury's still out on that. I think it's a little bit of both. One could say it's in my DNA. I've always had a love and affiliation for paranormal investigations and just the paranormal world in itself.
Let me just ask you this, because it may be tough to answer. But so you were reared by a mom who could communicate with those that have crossed over, and a grandmother who could do that as well. What was that like growing up? How did you realize your house was a little bit more different?
Well, if we're talking about the house itself, it was Pepto-Bismol pink with purple shutters. So one could say that it already stood out in a very small town. If you're talking internally, I always joke, when people are like, well, what's it like having two generations of psychic mediums in your house? And the first thing I will always say is, I couldn't get away with anything.
God knows you tried, and so did I.
Couldn't tell a lie.
Tested you.
Couldn't tell a lie to save my life. I get caught either way.
Listen, I think that's any kid that tries. But what age did you realize that your mom was different?
Very young. Very young. On the back end, you had my grandmother, who I refer to as Mum or Mum Joan.
Okay.
Her office was connected to the house, so it wasn't, it's not like she got in her car and went to a whole different area. She kept it very close. So I knew from a very young age that my Mum Joan had special abilities. At first I didn't quite understand why all these people were coming to our house. At first I was like, because they would accidentally knock on the front door and not the office door, because she had an addition built next to it. So, people would mistaken. And before, I remember you telling me that people would come in through the front door originally.
Yeah, back in the old day, Mom used the fourth bedroom, which was my brother Brian and Greg's room, prior to having the office built.
Yeah, so I knew from a very early age that my mom had a unique profession. In first grade, when people were like, oh, what does your mom do for a living? What does your dad do? And I'd be like, well, my mom speaks to ghosts.
Oh, okay.
And there would be silence in the room. And then we went from there.
Did you ever bring her for a show and tell?
Yeah, I brought my mom in. And everybody was like, my mom's a nurse. Oh, my mom's a nurse too. And they'd be like, well, where's your mom? And I said, well, she's at work. And she's like, and people would be like, well, what does grandma do? And I said, don't call her grandma. We never called her grandma.
You so didn't like that.
It was either Mom Joan or Joan.
Yeah.
Mom Joan would be like, I speak to spirits. Coming from a small town, you're in a room full of children under the age of 6. What does that mean? But
Can you imagine the conversations at the dinner table on the night of the The show and tell.
Aubrey's grandmom talks to ghosts. Can she talk to my grandma?
I'm surprised no one did ask her that.
No, yeah, nobody did. She read a story aloud, talked a little bit about her life, and then on to the next. Well, there were other parents, I believe, in the room too, so they got a first glimpse of that. Getting back to, I think from a very young age, I always knew our family was different. Not only with my mom's background and your background as well. When I was younger, you were a nurse, but not only that, you had this ability on top of that. So there was never a dull moment in the house, so to speak. My bedroom was your old bedroom.
Oh God, yes. Well, this is when we moved in with my mom.
Yes.
After we sold the house in Philadelphia, which is, my life parallels my mom's in so many ways, with taking over the business, and yours paralleled with moving into my old family home and then taking over the bedroom, my old bedroom. So what was that like living with a grandmother? You had alluded to people coming in and out of the house, clients.
Spirit or no spirit either. So there was always somebody.
Did you ever have an experience at the house with spirit?
Oh,
because I remember a story when you were little, when you were at your father's apartment that was in Mullica Hill that had Bubbles, your friend, who would yite up the toys with the batteries out of it.
Yeah, that was a little bit later when I was a little bit older. Yes, my dad's house was very active.
Yeah.
So I've never left it. But my experiences in Woodbury Heights and on Vanderbilt Ave, never a dull moment. Whether my mom was in her sessions or her readings, and then either she would take a break and come back in and she'd be like, "Hey, you doing okay?" I'm like, "Oh God," I'm like, "There's people here, my mom. There's people still here." They would always linger, just because her clients left didn't mean that their loved ones did. So, sleeping was sometimes tough because, they'd come and say hello to me. Our room, our room was above her office.
Yes.
Yeah. I have so many stories. We could sit here for hours.
Is there one waking you up or
waking me up? I think probably one of the most profound memories that I have. You were at work and
fixing broken bones and broken hearts.
Yes,
at that time.
You were doing your thing, and I was home with my mom, and I was a little bit older. I don't know. I want to say I was probably like 8 or 9. And I remember I was getting ready to go to a sleepover with some friends up on the hill. Literally, I had friends.
Yeah.
It's such a small town. Like I walk up the hill and I got 2 friends who I can stay over to hang out. Being an only child, you have to learn how to
make friends.
Yeah, make friends, entertain yourself. So I was getting ready for the sleepover, and I was downstairs. And I was in the guest bathroom. And I remember I was like getting ready. I was getting my toiletries or something like that. I knew that my mom, Joan, was upstairs. She was getting ready. A client had pulled up waiting in the waiting room. And for those who don't know, the setup of the house was it was 2 stories. On the bottom floor, there was a long hallway that connected to the addition. And there was a door that separated obviously the addition to the house where the waiting room was for my mom Joan's clients. So the bathroom was probably about 20 feet from the door, I would say, roughly. But the stairs were right to your right. And so I'm getting ready. I'm brushing my teeth or doing something. I'm looking in the mirror. And I remember my mom was upstairs.
In the house or
in the house?
Okay.
She was in the house upstairs getting ready. And it was very quick, this moment, because I knew the client was here. So she was coming down any moment. And I will never forget this. I'm reliving it now. I remember looking in the mirror, washing my hands, and in my peripheral, I see who I thought was my mom Joan coming down the steps. In my peripheral, it was a woman, same stature. I noticed in this split second that she had whiter hair. My mom's hair was platinum blonde.
Go girl.
Go girl. I didn't think anything of it. I see who I think is my mom coming down the steps. But my body, it was the strangest experience. In my mind, something told me, don't turn your head, just keep doing what you're doing because we're having a passing of a moment. I just remember I see this person coming down the steps and it's very close to me. Turn the corner.
Yeah, right there. The downstairs bathroom.
It's very close. It's very close. There is not a length,
You either walk in the bathroom or you make a right.
Or you make a right. Exactly. This person walks by me and I said, okay, mom, have a good night. Enjoy, I said something along those lines. No response. Weird. She would always say something, she'd be like, yeah, see you later. I didn't hear footsteps. It was carpeted, but you would hear shuffles. And I just remember I hear the door handle to the office, to the door leading into the waiting room jiggle, but I never heard it close. Now, mind you, I'm getting ready to leave. I'm on my way. And I was like, oh, that's weird. So I popped out my head. Mm-hmm. Door is closed, but I didn't hear it close. And I was like, that's weird. Okay. She's a quiet.
That's because that's a pretty heavy door. That was a fire door between the hallway, the house, and the office.
Yeah. So you heard it close every time.
Yeah, you would absolutely.
So the whole thing was strange. I remember feeling a little chilly. Like it was a little cold, the atmosphere. It was just this split second. It happened so fast. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go get my bag in my room. So I head up the stairs.
The same steps
that I thought she came down. And I go up to the second floor.
We had a split level. So there's, you go up steps, foyer, and then up a second step.
Correct.
Second flight.
And I turn right down the hallway to go to my bedroom. And here comes Mom Joan coming out of her bedroom. Now our bedrooms were right next to each other.
Yeah.
That's how close we were in all areas. I was very close to Mom Joan, whether our bedrooms were together or she'd take me out of school and take me on an investigation. That's another story. And I will never forget that she walks right out of the room. And I think I jumped 3 feet in the air and I went. The first thing I said, what are you doing here?
To Mama?
To Mom. She looks at me. She goes, I'm on my way to go to the office. And I will never forget this. I looked her right in the eye and she's like, yeah. She's like, I'm heading down. She's like, my client hasn't come yet. And I go, oh no, they're here. And she looked at me and her one eyebrow.
Yeah, she was notorious. Yeah.
That was the signature Joan Durham move was that one eyebrow. And then she gave me the biggest smirk. And I said, oh yeah, they're here. She looked at me. She goes, what happened? I said, I believe somebody's grandmother is here. And we talked about it. And like, that's those kind of moments that I would have with my Mom Joan. Like I would have these experiences in the house. And, I am so privileged to have those experiences because I talk to so many people who have had paranormal experiences who don't know how to react. Or when they tell somebody that's close to them, they get it was the wind. It was a creak in the floor. How frustrating that must be for them to have these experiences. And then when they express or tell somebody to not be believed.
Or just thought that not, or they're crazy or that was a figment of your. Yeah. And I've often said that you bring that up a great point, Bree, that I often say how blessed I was that I had a mom that I could talk to about this who could make sense of it.
Yeah.
So that was the neat thing about living with Mom Joan is, there was many of those experiences, you're sharing one with my listeners now about what it was like. The house was active. It's interesting. Growing up in that house, all of my brothers have an ability, and to some degree, one may be more psychic, one may be more clairvoyant, see them, hear them. But we often growing up, like, when you walk into a funeral parlor and you have that smell of flowers, like a florist shop, if we would smell floral shop in the house, we knew that we would be hearing of someone's crossing. The house would actually get busy, like crowded, like we would be bumping into them in our living room. Brian would look over at me and goes, Kimmy, we're going to hear somebody's crossing. And it was like, okay, go try your suit on, make sure your dress shoes fit kind of thing. And sure enough, a week or two later, we would have the news that, an aunt, an uncle, or someone we knew and loved had earned their wings. So that's interesting that you had so many of those experiences. Well, how's it feel that this ability runs in the family?
It's interesting because I, again, it's how I was raised. So I never really questioned it. It was there. It was always a moment. And I think what you've taught me in the past and what my mom's taught me in the past, our ability to just have open dialogue about it, I think made it very comfortable for me to express it to other people. But when I would get reactions, when I would say, when people would ask, what does your mom do for a living? Or what does your grandmother do for a living? And when I said they're a psychic medium back in the 90s, early 2000s, oh, she's a gypsy or she's a witch or she's something like that. And I was like, no, she's a psychic medium. I was very firm on the correct verbiage, so to speak.
So what do you think, what's the misunderstanding people have about psychic mediums?
I think
because I agree with you, and I hate to step on your toes. Like back in the day, mom was the pioneer. Like, she made it okay to be a psychic medium within her reach. And I say, she had international clients, but this is before social media. Since Teresa Caputo, John Edwards, those other people have come through the social media route and have shown that the connection to have the ability to connect with those that have crossed over, they've taken away that the misnomer of being a witch or something negative, I would say. But have you found that to be true, or have you had any misunderstandings about what was the number one thing that people would say to you when you said your mom's a psychic medium?
I would get protest with, that's not a job. And I'd be like, well, then why does she have a business card? I would be very direct. I'd be like, no, I went with her to go pick up these business cards. She has business cards. She hands them out to people. It's a profession. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about psychic mediums is that first, they're willing to give a reading at any moment, at any time, which is not always the case.
Am I studio?
I've seen my mom in public settings where people knew her and they were like trying to get one in the middle of an Acme, and you're just like, no, I just want a food shop, one of the biggest misconceptions is, at the end of the day, I believe, in my experience and my living and my upbringing, it is a profession, and it's a very intimate profession. I don't think people really take that into consideration. They're sitting down with a complete stranger and telling about the loved ones who have crossed and what messages they want to receive from them, or what aspirations or what things they want to see in their future. And in those readings, I think what people think is, I think as a society, we want total control in the sense of, I need it now. I want these answers now, and I need these answers now. And as somebody who's been to a lot of your events and also seen my mom do her side, because you guys differ in your talents and in your abilities. My mom was a little bit more closed door. You've taken it by storm with social media, and you do more open events and a large crowd, which my mom didn't do. My mom was very much behind the scenes. We keep quiet about it because she was, very old school and tradition in the fact of it's still not accepted, or it's frowned upon, or it's taboo.
I think that I've had the advantage of social media where mom didn't.
Yeah.
She built the business on word of mouth, which is huge.
Yeah.
And did so remarkably well with that. It's an unusual profession, having a mother and a grandmother do it, and thinking that we're in the office 24/7 is difficult. But do you believe you have this ability?
I do. I have it in certain ways. I label myself more as an empath. I'm very tied in emotionally when I go into, whether it be a quasi reading that I wasn't prepared for or an experience, I should say. And I'll touch base on that. But yes, I do believe I have an ability to speak to spirits. I've been doing it since I was 3.
And I've talked about this, that, there's been studies at Duke University, the pineal gland or pineal gland over it. Yes, you've been chatting with them since you were 3-4 years of age.
Second nature to me. So when people, when I've gone on dates or when I've met new people and, the standard questions like, what does your family do for a living? And when I say it, I'm still met with a silent pause, a buffering, as I like to call it.
Yeah.
And then I hear the, I get the, a lot.
Didn't see that one coming.
I love it because then I get to share my stories. I think that's what it's all about, telling people that 9 to 5s exist, but 5 to 9s exist as well, in a different realm, so to speak.
When you were little, did you ever wish I did something different?
Oh my God, all the time. Well, you were a nurse,
Uh-huh.
you did the nurse. You had the normal job.
Yeah, this is true. Well,
Well,
I
not
get
normal,
you.
but you had a profession that people were like, oh, she's a nurse. Nurses are held to a very high standard in the medical field alongside doctors. They're the fix-its. They can fix things. I've never, I never questioned your ability in your profession. And so when you took over or when you started your own mediumship journey,
Uh-huh.
I never had any doubts because you've always shared your ability. I joke when you were at work, my mom Joan wasn't home baking cookies. We were talking about her experiences, her paranormal investigations, and then you'd come home and talk about your side, your nursing ability, and how you used your psychic ability to help patients, or you've had these experiences. So I came from different
Uh-huh.
backgrounds from the both of you, and I had you under one roof. But like I said, to have the open dialogue that we had, I'm very, very fortunate. I'm so glad that I wasn't like shooed away or, considered, the weird one.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember when my mom didn't want to talk about what she did as a living. She would mention she was a librarian. And I've had situations when I'm traveling and people are like, hey, what do you do for? Oh, I'm a nurse. And, it just makes it easier that I don't have to go into what I do because they expect right away that you're going to talk to a loved one.
I will say this. I will admit in my teenage years, I did say you were a therapist
There you
because
go.
it made it a lot easier.
Yeah. Not that I'm not proud of what I do.
No. But
because people think that you're working 24/7.
yeah.
Yeah, it is an unusual profession.
Yeah, for sure. And I wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, I love that you wouldn't have it any other way because I believe children pick their parents. So you came along for this journey for a reason. And I thank you for sharing some of your thoughts about what it was like to grow up with a mom who's a psychic medium. And as I always end my podcast with a mediumship moment, I want to share what it was like for me to grow up with a mom who was a psychic medium. And again, I didn't know it was any different. I was blessed that I had a mom who would talk about this ability. There was a time in our house where the activity would always ramp up. And I can remember this one time where my mom always would come in the house when she was out doing, she used to call them house parties. And she'd come in the house at, late at night, 11:30, 12, maybe even 1 o'clock, especially if she was in Pennsylvania, over in Philly, having coffee with the girls. This one time, my mom actually came home and came through the front door and went up to bed. She's too tired because usually she'd come in the office and she'd do a head count. She'd hit the 4th bedroom, Brian and Greg. She'd come up the steps to the next bedroom, Bob. She'd take a peek in, make sure, and then me, and then circle around and go into her bedroom. This one morning, early morning, mom comes home, goes right to bed. So that night at dinner, brother turns around to mom and he goes, Mom, God, you scared the crap out of me last night. She goes, what? Yeah. You came in the office. I heard the door and you came down the steps. I was falling asleep. I slept on the couch because, we would sometimes use the office as like our own little living room. We didn't want to watch what the rest of us were watching in the rec room. And so my brother's like, oh my, Mom, you scared the crap out of me. You turned to me and you told me I should be in bed. Get to bed now. And then you went through the door and you went up to bed. And she's like, I didn't go through the office last night. I was exhausted. Came right in the front door and went right to bed. I was exhausted. No, Mom, you did. I saw you. You had a white, well, what was I wearing? Well, you had like a white nightgown on. White nightgown? Yeah. And you yelled at me, told me to go to bed. I shouldn't be in here. And then you went through the door. I went, what? Through the door. And that's when my brother realized it wasn't my mom. So on any given day in our house, we could have an experience like this. And it was just my normal. So Thanks
now,
again.
and now it's become my normal.
And now it's your normal too. So thanks again, everybody, for listening to Mediumship Moments. And as I always ask you, keep chatting with your angels because they can hear you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time for another episode of Mediumship Moments. If you enjoyed this episode of Kym's podcast, check her out on Instagram and TikTok at Kym Durham Medium.